Make sure you consent.
All right, everyone, we are just about to get started. Waiting for a few more folks to trickle in. Thank you for joining us today. Wonderful. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So thanks again once more for attending today's webinar on your retirement renaissance. We're going to dive into what that means in just a moment, but first, I want to make sure we did a quick intro. I know most of our attendees will know at least some of us, maybe not all of us. I want to start off with maybe we'll start with the right this time. We have Perry McLean here, joins us with over 30 years of experience as a financial advisor. To his left, we have Jim Shockman, certified investment management analyst, longtime advisor as well, co-founder of Conestoga Wealth Partners with AJ Tebow to his left, who is a certified financial planner, and again, co-founded Conestoga with Jim back in 2010. And then last, hopefully not least, we have to the left myself, Connor Hartman, financial advisor, as you can maybe tell, the newest to the crew. Thank you again for joining us today. We're looking forward to sharing everybody's knowledge. And we wanted to go ahead and get started. So stepping back for a moment here, we called this the retirement renaissance. And part of the reason why we decided to call that this webinar that is because we hear as advisors the word retirement all the time, constantly, in fact. And we were actually talking amongst ourselves before, and we've kind of become convinced that there might be a better word for it. I mean, the word retirement doesn't really do the experience justice most of the time. We thought it should almost be more like stepping into a renaissance, and maybe stepping back a little bit more even to explain that. So the Renaissance, for those who aren't as familiar with history, it was a period in history where there were just incredible movements and happenings taking place. There were developments in philosophy that were leading to big events in the world, actual changes in power, and there were incredible people that were shaping the landscape of art, music, language, and just people's way of living life. You had famous people like, what's
you
that?
remember that, Perry? Perry remembers the Renaissance period.
Yeah, I did. I painted a couple of paintings back in those days.
I think that's him laying on the stairs there.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, Perry can join the famous folks like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo.
I used to get him coffee.
Anyways, in the Renaissance too, it gave that idea, that term of the Renaissance man, kind of that term for, the kind of person who wants to embrace their best self, becoming their best self, and just often being really well-rounded and having a lot of talents. It was a great time. And we kind of feel the same way about retirement in a sense. There's so much, such a rich opportunity there. It's definitely not the beginning of the end, as so many people like to make jokes about. When done right, it should be just an incredible opportunity and the chance to step into the best part of your life. People are commonly living 20, even 30 years into retirement, and even more than that. There's so much more left to go. And admittedly, for most of us, we can find joy and purpose, even fulfillment with what we do for a career. And even for some of us, it might be our calling. There's a handful of us who might be in that boat. Pablo Picasso, I mean, he was still painting when he was in his 90s. And Thomas Edison, another great example, still inventing later in life. But for many of us, our work may not be the highlight. In fact, probably shouldn't be the highlight of our lives. And by stepping into retirement, a lot of people have the opportunity to redefine themselves and to live their best life. So, it's an opportunity to spend time doing exactly what you want to do. And a great example, Peter Mark Roget, He was a physician. He was a natural theologian, and he actually, after retired, decided to start writing. And I would think for most of us it'd be really boring. Writing a thesaurus is not most people's idea of a great time, but for him it was actually soothing, and it helped him with depression that he had suffered from even as a young man. But over a decade into retirement, he finishes and ends up creating one of the most important references in the history of the world. He didn't sit there and just watch TV. He pursued his passions. So, we as advisors, and I'm going to have the rest of the crew here chime in on this. There's people who are afraid to retire or have at least a lot of questions about retirement. Maybe they worry about leaving something behind that they already know, a lifestyle they're familiar with. There's a lot of questions people have. AJ, maybe you could start us off. Do you have any thoughts about some of these things that you see with your clients?
Well, I mean, certainly they're the popular things that we hear a lot, but I think the main takeaway should be, it's important to have the financial plan, can you afford to retire, but also what, plan for your time. People need to have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. What are they going to do with their time all day to keep them mentally and physically engaged?
Yeah, I think you think about work, you think about it, it's your primary relationship, it's your structure, it provides meaning, it sustains you, it becomes kind of this well-worn emotional path of certainty. And, breaking away from that, it's almost like it's like someone dying. It's a major event, or, I liken it more to like when you're 20 and you have your whole life ahead of you and you're not really sure what to do. And one of the questions I like to suggest people ask is, what would the current self tell your 20-year-old self? If you were in that period of indecisiveness, what have you learned throughout your life? What have you figured out that's really important to you, that really matters? And, try to give yourself some advice, because really it's almost like starting over. It's like kind of like being a 20-year-old again.
I think it's also important that I think we changed the way we look at retirement and going from being just an event. Historically, I think we viewed it as an event. You get the retirement dinner, the gold watch, you clean out your desk and they kind of move you out the door, and that's the event. As opposed to looking at it as a process, the process of transitioning from more work to maybe less work or no work in terms of the conventional job or employment situation, to looking at how I'm going to transition my time. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an all or nothing event. And I guess I relate back to one thing. When I graduated from college, I remember walking up on the podium, getting my diploma, and then I walked by and I grabbed the diploma, which didn't even have the diploma in it, and that was it. I mean, then it was like, I'm done. And so it was an event, and I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do now? Because I was looking at it like an event. It wasn't the process of moving from an educational occupation, as it were, to an actual occupation. So I think it's important for us to kind of treat retirement perhaps more as a process that we're going through, as opposed to just, okay, this is the day and everything changes and now it's going to be different.
Yeah, I think you're right. You have to put some thought into it. What does well-being mean to you? And there's some free courses that you can take that are pretty good that talk about the psychology. Yeah, the one difference between a 20-year-old and a 60-year-old is, when you're 20 years old, you generally don't have much money, but you have lots of time. When you're 60, you usually have more money, but your time becomes, potentially shorter. So I think that adds a little bit of pressure. But, if you think about it, if you're lucky, you retire. If you're in your 60s, maybe you have 30 more years. That's quite a bit of time to really make an impact and to do a lot of things. But I think the key there is really finding out what is, what enhances your and the people you care about's well-being.
Yeah. Well
and then
said.
get rid of the other stuff.
The happiest retirees that I know are always saying, I don't have time to work. I'm too
Yeah.
busy.
That's a good sign when they say, I don't know how I ever had time to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good sign. And we'll cover that more in a little bit, but absolutely.
Good point, AJ. That's
It's a great point. You know, it's actually kind of funny. There was a video that I saw on Facebook recently, and it was actually really heartwarming. It was about a police officer. He was in his car and he was signing off for the last time. And he had been working in the police department for, I think it was over 30 years. And so that had really been his structure in his life as he knew it. I mean, that's what he did day in, day out. And you could tell that signing off, even though he was excited and he was looking forward to the next chapter, there was so much structure and familiarity with what he was doing that, you know, he was choking back tears, and it was hard for him to do it. But I think, you know, leaving that sense of familiarity, even if it may not be something we enjoy quite as much, it can be a great stepping stone to the next great thing in your life. So,
in a way, COVID has kind of given us a glimpse into what a restricted life or a changed life might look like. Many of us haven't left the house or barely left the house, and we haven't been doing the kinds of things that we normally do, perhaps. And a lot of people go into retirement that way. They quit working, and then all of a sudden they have no structure, and their whole world is kind of turned upside down, just kind of like it is now a little bit. So it's good to try to be prepared for that and treat it, like I said, as a process as opposed to an event.
Yeah, that's a good point. So that must be the guy on the right on this picture.
they look similar. They might be the same person. I guess it's the one side is COVID, the other one's non-COVID.
You know, Connor, to your point about structure, retiring for somebody that's used to that kind of structure doesn't mean that structure has to go away. I think the structure is still important, you know, to if they got up early, still get up early, you know, follow the same, develop new routines that are still going to be healthy, you know, versus sleeping in too long or sitting around watching TV. I have to say the miserable retirees that I know sit around all day. They don't have activities. They don't have things to keep them mentally and physically engaged. They have no sense of a self purpose.
Absolutely. Yep. You put the nail on the head, AJ. I think what we found, I mean, more than anything, it's you want to put some thought into it to have that structure, or whatever you want to your day to look like. The key is putting some thought into it and being deliberate with what you're doing, as opposed to, you know, just kind of finishing what your normal work schedule was, transitioning to having nothing to do. That's
Or waiting for something to happen.
Yeah. And I think I've seen a lot of studies done that try to study and see how beneficial it is to retire for people. And some studies come back good, some come back bad. But the main consensus seems to be, if you look at everything, that for people who stay busy and have things to do and people to be around, that makes a huge difference, more than almost anything else. So maybe we'll walk through and let's walk through this this fantasy a little bit here. So some potential things that you could do, maybe the things that we have seen the most that clients like to do with their time after they retire. What's next? Maybe one of the big ones, and something that's probably close to home for a lot of us right now, is, you know, we want to take that time to do the things that maybe we've been placing on the back burner, you know, travel, taking more vacation time, going to events. What do you guys think about this?
I'll pipe in a little bit. I mean, these are kind of the go-to things, but you know, I think I think a big part of it is personal relationships, having contact with other people. You know, there's been some studies done. I went through a course on well-being. It was a free course through Yale. And, you know, it was amazing the difference that just having relationships and connecting with other people have. I think the other thing is that these can be very personalized events. You know, if you like gardening or just doing stuff around the house. I know AJ likes his horses and takes care of those, and his cows and his stump ranch. He likes working on that. You know, we all kind of have our things, and if we take our passions or working on cars or whatever it is, and then connect with other people that do the same thing, I think that seems to people I talk to and that I've dealt with, that seems to be things that bring a lot of happiness.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of funny. I think most of us would agree that we can be on a really nice, fancy cruise ship, and if you're there by yourself, solo, it might not have quite the same color to it that you know, having your family or friends there with you might.
Yeah, who wants to travel by themselves? I can't tell you how many people have told me, yeah, I'd like to travel, but I don't have anybody to travel with.
Yeah. And travel doesn't have to be expensive. You know, it can be road trips, and every once in a while, not lately because of the coronavirus, but you know, Alaska Airlines puts out I think it's called Alaska Insider, and at the last minute, usually like a week before, they'll send out an email of places that they have flights available for really inexpensive. You know, and I always thought, just when I retire, I could just like, oh, okay, hey, I've never been to San Jose. Let's jump on a flight to San Jose and see what that looks like. Or, you know, someplace in the Midwest, in South Dakota or something like that. It might be neat to just to have the time to explore.
I have to chime in for the solo travelers here, since I'm the only person who seems to be solo in this group. But I took a vacation last year to Scotland. I went by myself, and I decided to go with a tour group. So there are ways that those of us who don't have travel companions perhaps can do that. And I must tell you that that was one of the most enjoyable experiences of my life. Those folks that I got a chance to meet, interact with, and travel with were an excellent group of people, and it was the experience of a lifetime. So don't let those preconceptions necessarily stop you from doing that. Kind of try to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and look at it, because it can be very enjoyable doing it that way too as well.
Wonderful.
I think you're only limited by your creativity.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many people that we run into. It's like, oh, I've always wanted to go to France, or I've always wanted to go to Italy. You know, it's like, well, when are you going to do that? You know, why not now?
Yeah.
Can't go now, but when it reopens.
Yeah.
It will. You know, this is temporary.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Perry, that's a great point. Great perspective there. I love that. That's really good to hear. And there's a lot of people who are in that boat too, I would think.
Well, I was very resistant to it for a while, but until I actually committed to it and did it. And I found, I mean, you know, I'm almost 65, and on my tour group, there were male and female people who were my age or older who didn't have traveling companions. So I understand there's some security and safety issues I'm sure that people consider, but a well-rounded group can have all those things. You can still make good friends and enjoy yourself a lot too. So don't resist the opportunity to at least explore it.
Sure, absolutely. Kind of moving along here, another huge one that we see, probably one of the most often, is hobbies. I mean, things that people pick up, maybe they already enjoyed doing that before they were retired, but now they get to spend more time on it or dive into it in more depth, or maybe take on something new. There's a few examples here, just a handful of some of them, but there's so much that people can find joy in, and I think especially now more than ever. What do you guys think about this?
Well, I'm going to do a little commercial here. For anybody that bakes cookies, I will trade cookies for financial advice. Okay.
I think AJ was bungee jumping, wasn't he? Before, wasn't that what you were doing, AJ? Bungee jumping? So
no, but yeah, I mean, I think these things bring, you know, things that people are passionate about, that, you know, things that maybe they only had sparse amount of time to do while they were working. Now they can do more. You know, I think of the clients that golf when they were working, but then they retired and, you know, retire to someplace near a golf course and golf every day, or gardening. I mean, you know, lots of clients that like to garden. You know, some of these things can turn into things that used to be just kind of passive hobbies into, you know, real passions.
Yeah, I've got another comment too. I see boating here. That's a pretty good way to wipe out your retirement. So I would really think a lot about, as a boat owner, I would really take a close look at that. The best thing to do is not to buy a boat, it's to have a friend that owns a boat, and then every time you go out, just fill their tank up and you'll be way ahead.
I could say the same thing about horses.
Yeah, I know. It's we had horses too. My uncle used to say to my aunt, she had horses, and he used to complain. He'd say the only thing dumber than a horse is the person that owns the horse.
Yeah.
No offense, AJ. We laughed about it, but I don't. I mean, horses. My mom loved horses, and yeah, if it makes you happy and you get enjoyment out of it, it doesn't really matter what it is. I mean, hey, you have nothing but time. You know, if you don't like it, you can always try something else.
Yeah.
Motorhomes, you know, a lot of times it's better to rent first before you jump in with both feet to make sure you like it.
I'll have to put a plug in for physical activity too. Those of you who know me or know me well know that I'm engaged in a lot of different kinds of physical activity. I do yoga and Pilates and do a lot of things like that. And one of the things that some sort of physical activity does, it helps to increase your, I think, your willingness to do more. You get out there and you have more stamina, you feel better about yourself, which in turn leads you to be more apt to get out and do more things. If you're very sedentary and you sit around all the time, you may have a problem and you can't do it physically, but if you're capable, if you're out doing the exercise and so forth, that tends to promote you wanting to be more active because you have more energy and you feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. AJ was joking around the other day about his car and how much he enjoys his car. And I remember you were talking about your decision to do it, to just get the car. You're like, I can still get into it, right? Well,
Yeah, Perry, now to set the record, Perry got a new car too.
but I mean, this exercise that Perry's talking about, I mean, that's going to help. It keeps people being able to do the things they love longer. You know, I mean, it keeps you active. I mean, that alone just does so much. You're going to most likely live longer, which, I mean, we got a plan for you guys to live longer, which is something that's a challenge maybe, but a good problem to have.
Well, I'm encouraged. If Perry can still get in his car at 65, then I should be okay for another 10 years.
I would hope so.
Yeah, I would think you would be fine. You know, that's interesting. You know, you're right. It's like it gives you momentum going into retirement. So if the younger you start doing it, I think it kind of gets you to a point where before it gets tougher to do stuff, you actually go longer. The other thing, you know, at this course I went through was an interesting study, but they compared people who were depressed, and they looked at people that took antidepressants versus people that didn't exercise a lot, maybe 3 times a week for 20 minutes. And they found that the people that exercised 3 times a week got just as much benefit from the exercise as the people that took the antidepressant, which was, to me, was amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. Exercise can do a lot for you. And it's a social component too. I mean, when you're out walking the golf course, when you're getting out of your golf cart and you're talking to your buddies, or you're in an exercise class, I mean, a great example of this in the Northwest in particular, pickleball is huge, and it's usually played with partners. And I've played before with a lot of folks who are retired, and not only do they kick my tail because they're actually really talented at it, but they love hanging out with everyone. It's just a good social environment to hang out with people who are like-minded and care about their health. I mean, it's a good place to be. So.
And there's stuff. Go ahead, AJ.
No, I was just going to say, even just getting out and walking, you know, I talk to clients in their 70s and 80s, and, oh yeah, I walked a mile today, or I walked the mall today. Just something to get out and get the blood flowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really true. The evidence supports that too. The scientific evidence supports that.
Yeah.
So the other thing too is, on the social interaction, there's a lot of stuff out there that you could go. I know I live on Fox Island, and they have a bunch of people. They get together on Wednesday mornings, or they did, and they will have again. They just sit around, have coffee, and chew the fat and talk about whatever. And it's kind of interesting because there's so many different people from so many different walks and so many different ideas. There was a retired manager from Costco. There's a guy that works on oil wells up in Alaska. There's a guy that worked for a record company. I mean, and they all have interesting conversations, and that stimulation, I think, is really, really good to have those kinds of things. And they're out there. They're all over the place.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Another thing that's huge, we've seen a lot of clients enjoy and get a lot of just rewarding experiences out of, is donating their time, teaching or volunteering, tutoring. I mean, it's a great way to stay engaged with people. And I actually had a client who was talking about this, and he's retired, but he still coaches. And he was talking about how being around younger people actually energizes him and keeps him sharp. And he also feels really good about just being able to give back and stay involved in a community that, he's been a part of for a long time. And I thought, man, that would be, that's something that I think I would want to do when I was retired, is continue to coach and give back somewhere. Maybe you guys have similar situations with clients.
I've been involved with my university for a number of years, and in fact, I have a meeting with them tomorrow, a virtual meeting about career employment service. And what we do is we help transitioning juniors and seniors get access to resources about employment following their education, and different sorts of networking and things like that. And I find that quite rewarding as well. And Connor, as you know, you've been with me to my university, and we've spoken to classes about the kind of work we do. And, as a matter of fact, right before COVID, we did an event where you and I had, about 55 students, I think, that we spoke to, which it just blew my mind, because I couldn't believe we had that many people sign up to hear us and what we had to say. And for those of us who've been around a while, it's very rewarding to be able to do that. I get more out of it than I can imagine, in just being able to give back and sharing a little bit. And we've always gotten really good feedback and get invited back. So if you've got a university or a college that you went to that's local and you can do that, or if there's some area of expertise that you have, maybe not around your work, but something else, then get out there and try to do that, because I guarantee you, when you give a little bit, you get more in return, I think. So.
Yeah, and the research proves that out. People that volunteer in general are much happier than people that don't volunteer or do things like that outside of themselves. And I should be doing more of that. I always think, oh geez, but when you do it, I've never felt worse by doing something, help lending a hand.
Yeah. Jim, you're shortchanging yourself a little bit, I think. I know Jim has volunteered as a treasurer for some service clubs before in the past. I think it's a noble endeavor and not an easy one to do, but rewarding to be a part of some of those groups too.
Even if it's aggravating, it's rewarding. It's just something about doing something and not getting paid for it, and seeing how people, especially when people appreciate it, or even if they don't, just doing it, knowing that you've done something like that is really good. But I could definitely do a lot more. I'm a little too selfish still.
One client he's a particular inspiration to me, and he's in his mid 80s. So he's a Korean War era veteran. Military was very, very important to him. And after he retired from his civilian job, which is when I met him about 25 years ago, he was very active with the VFW, so active that and all of this was volunteer. It was the post commander for I think it was all of Western Washington. I mean, he would travel around all the different VFWs, making sure that they were, following the rules. But, and even today, I mean, he's not in that position anymore, but even today he's very, very active in the community, and he still travels to Japan every other year, even in his mid 80s.
Thought I was your hero, AJ.
Ah, sorry, Perry.
I just, with me helping you with technology and everything, I figured that was it. So.
Yeah.
Those of you
That's
who
an
don't know,
inside joke here in the office. So
we have
Yeah, I have so much respect for people that do that and volunteer, because I know how much work it is and how much time it takes, and it really is. If you volunteer, it really is like having a full-time job with certain jobs that you do, and you can do it at whatever level you're comfortable with. You don't have to run the whole thing. You can just volunteer, go in with a rake and clean up or do whatever. But yeah, you can get as involved with volunteering as you want to get, and maybe more. So it's just kind of making sure it's something that means something to you.
Make-A-Wish is always looking for volunteers.
Yeah. Or Rotary. Perry's was a Rotarian for many years, and I'm a Rotarian currently. And there's a lot of people who are in Rotary who do a lot of service projects, and
Boys and Girls Club is another one. Very
Yep.
excellent organization.
And there's a lot of people who are retired, so it's a similar group in terms of experiences sometimes, and they can relate to things and do good while doing that. I mean, there's just so much out there, so many choices, so many things we can do.
It's just one last thing on that. It doesn't have to be a big thing too. The same study that I looked at, people got benefits from just being nice to people, even neighbors or just strangers, especially. That seemed to have a really big effect. Doing something nice for a stranger, even as little as just saying hello to them or striking up a conversation. There's lots of benefits that come from that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Kind of along similar lines. I mean, there might also be some people tuning in who still want a little bit of income, or they want their work to count for something, or maybe they even love the job that they previously had and they want to be involved somehow. I mean, part-time work, it's something that can serve people really well and make a kind of ease-in version of retiring, where it is more of a process like Perry talked about, and you can gradually work your way into a different schedule.
Like a halfway house. Retirees. It's even better if you don't have to really get paid to do it. Then you can kind of just pick something because it's fun and you're around lots of people if that's what you want to be, and not really have to worry about, paying your bills. Makes work a lot more fun.
In one of our earlier talks, we talked about kind of evaluating your time. And I think a lot of, the thoughts about when you want to go into retirement is there something else that you would rather, if you're working part-time or you're doing some work and you're still working and you really enjoy your job, what is it that you could do outside of that is more valuable to you than spending time working? Because at the end of the day, at the more advanced ages that we are when we are in retirement, the clock is shorter. So you don't have as many hours. So you have to prioritize your time. If there's some things on your bucket list that you really, really want to do, then you might not want to work so much. And if you've got nothing at all to do, you might want to still work a little bit, because at least you're occupying your time with something, especially if you enjoy your job and what your profession was. I know some people are kind of have more job-oriented things, but other people have professions and they really loved what they did. They just don't want to do it 8 or 10 hours a day anymore. And so, again, finding the balance of that transition is really important, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. Your time, going back to what I said earlier, when you're young, you have lots of money, or you have lots of time and not much money. And once you get to retirement, you usually have more money, but then the time becomes an issue. So it's real important to make sure if you're not going to do it now, you probably will never do it. So I think it's worth spending some time making sure that you're spending your time doing the things that are most important to you.
Yeah. Something I thought was interesting, I was reading they call it the Health and Retirement Study from the National Institute on Aging. And they found that 75% of the workers that they interviewed who were getting a little bit older, they were starting to hit that age where they were thinking about retirement. And they said 75% of them said they would like to phase into retirement. They would like to do part-time work and reduce their hours. But when they came back and looked at that same group of workers, they found that only 13% of them were actually doing what they said they wanted to do. And so I think that even though it's a nice thought, I mean, there's a lot of people who just aren't taking advantage of that opportunity to maybe dial it back gradually as opposed to just going cold turkey all of a sudden. There's a lot of options out there to, phase into things if you'd like.
Yeah, you use your money. That's what it's there for.
Yes, use your money.
You really need to make, the wealth you've built up, you really want to turn it into the kind of life you want. I mean, it's crazy to not do that. Oh.
Yeah, I thought I'd throw
That's
this.
AJ's newest client. Doing a financial plan for his.
He's getting advice.
AJ's getting advice by the look of it.
Yeah.
Like, what's
what
that?
I mean.
Change me. Change
She
me.
was,
Feed
she was
me.
making noise. She
Yeah.
was making noise.
Well, I think we can all agree that what we've been saying all along, and having people who are involved along the way, and I mean, when you retire, you should have some type of idea of who you're going to spend your time with. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that people often miss from their work is the relationships that they have from going in each day. So, I mean, having your family and your family can be your friends. It doesn't have to be a blood relation, but spending time with family has got to be one of the most rewarding things that I've seen my own clients, at least, be able to enjoy more when they retire.
Yeah, that's and also figuring out who you don't want to spend time with is important too. I mean, you got, don't waste your time doing things that are not enhancing your well-being or the people you care about.
Yeah, clients that are planning things with families, whether they're trips or, family gatherings, reunions, you can just sense the excitement and how much they're looking forward to it.
Maybe that's the best part. Sometimes getting families together can be a little hairy, but the memories are always good. I mean, that's just part of being a family. You don't always agree on things.
The important thing is just to not make them too long, a few days, a week.
Yeah, it's like company. It's like the fish rule. It's company and fish after 3 days, they don't smell very good. So you kind of limit however long the piece of fish will last sitting on the counter. That's how long your visitor should stay.
Yeah. I'm thinking of Christmas vacation a little bit here when relatives suddenly arrive, especially if they're retired, they might have a little more time on their hands to suddenly drop in unannounced. And how long will you be staying?
Is that how you feel about your father-in-law when that happens?
Yeah, so for those tuning in who don't know, AJ happens to be my father-in-law, and actually most of the time it's me crashing his party. I'm usually the one headed over to his place, so he's fortunate enough to have me.
Whenever the pictures come up from was it last year? I think it was, maybe the year before, where we all went to Disney World and the four of us went golfing. I mean, I'll say it. I always say it. One of the best days of my life. My son and sons-in-law out golfing, wonderful experience.
Yeah, a long time in the making, and you see it all kind of come to fruition. All those dirty diapers and all those teenage years, and now you're able to really enjoy it. That's wonderful.
And I mean, I think that we can also relate to the fact that, grandchildren in particular can be a really cool thing, or even just someone who's a lot younger, maybe you have even a niece or a nephew who has a child and you're close to them or something to that nature, having a younger generation like that you get to be a part of, that's pretty special too. And you can see that a
Keeps you
lot
on
more.
your toes for sure.
Well, daycare is expensive these days. So, when grandparents have the time I'll say it, step up and, be a daycare provider, it can be a big burden on a young family.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's a little harder when you get older. You're making me want to keep working, AJ.
Well, Denise is being a pretty much full-time caregiver for our new granddaughter, and she's loving it. This is a dream come true for her.
Yeah.
This is all good stuff, man. It's good stuff to think about.
Absolutely. So, we've been talking a lot. We spent a lot of time actually talking about some of the things that clients do with their time. And I think that's one of the key things is first being able to ask yourself, what am I going to want to do? Because once you have some of those goals in mind, that's when we can kind of step in and be of help. If it's really hard when someone that you're talking to says, all right, I want to retire. And then you say, okay, well, what do you want to do with your retirement? Like what kinds of activities, and they don't have an answer and they say, I don't know. It's really hard to do much planning. They don't know what kind of lifestyle they want to live or what kinds of things they might want to do and spend money on. Kind of hard to do financial planning sometimes.
Yeah, what can I afford? It's a little scary. The planning definitely helps, and it's amazing when people put together a plan. This has always amazed me. How easy it is ultimately to stick to the plan and how well it works out. And I suspect that just having a plan there, it isn't that there's something special going on. Just having a plan, you just tend to stick within the plan. It gives you a framework. And we've been around. Perry has, and AJ even. I've been around long enough where I've had people go from retirement into their 90s, and it's just amazing how but the key is just making sure you're doing what you really want to do with your life. There's nothing sadder than to see somebody never spend their money and just not enjoy it and not do the things. And it's better to do it while you're alive. If you want to do things for your kids, why not do it for them while you're around to enjoy it and watch them benefit from it. So there's a lot of nuances. It's not all or none, but I think planning ahead is pretty good.
I think the planning process, one of the main things, a lot of you that are watching have been through this process, and we ask, what does retirement look like? Well, I want to travel. Well, what kind of travel do you want? Do you want travel in the US? Is it going to be a road trip? Is it going to be with an RV? Or is this going to be European round the world travel? Big difference. It all speaks to lifestyle, right? Because the first one is usually not that expensive, and there's not a lot of planning financially that we need to do for it because it's relatively inexpensive. But somebody that's going to take 2 Disney World trips a day or 2 European or a year or 2 European trips a year, that's some significant planning. That can be a pretty big outlay of money. So it's all about lifestyle and about means and the level that you want to do these things. But I think it's important for people to just make a list. What are you passionate about? What would you really like to do? What are the places that you'd really like to see? And then, maybe it's not in the next year or 2, but maybe it's in the next 5 years that we plan for it.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of possibilities. I think it's, you don't want to let yourself become overwhelmed by the possibilities. I think, narrowing that down to things that are, I tell people this about conspiracy theories, hey, it's possible, but anything's possible. So what you really have to do is look at how probable it is and look at the science and look at the realities and see whether it's something that really is or probable of happening. It's kind of the same thing with planning, your life. You look at all these possibilities. You just have to decide whether you want to put all your chips on this one thing or you want to do 3 things or 4 things. You can do anything you want, really. You just can't probably do everything. And so it's prioritizing is a big part of this.
Yeah. You know, speaking to that a little bit, Jim, I mean, the possibilities versus probabilities. I think we've had clients who have approached us before who have been early enough and they've had the foresight to do planning, and we get to have that fun conversation of possibilities. And then there are some folks who have come to us and unfortunately maybe they didn't make the greatest choices or they didn't do enough planning early on, and then they're left with probabilities, and instead that's the conversation that we have. And I think that's why it's so important to do planning, because um, sometimes it's hard to step back and look at the big picture and see where your actions are actually taking you if you continue. There's a lot of benefit just to take a few hours and just do a little bit of planning. It can save you a lot of time and stress later on.
So, prioritizing your time, because if you don't prioritize your time, it will prioritize you eventually. And the same goes for your money. And if you prioritize your money, you can do the same thing. Otherwise, eventually it'll prioritize you when you're in a box and you've got nothing left to spend it on. So,
Yeah. Want to keep people secure and having a nice, feeling comfortable with what they're doing, and get to plan for the fun things. So,
And that's fun for everybody.
yeah, exactly. That's the fun. Those are the fun conversations to have. We're wrapping up here. I guess I couldn't help but notice these pictures of dandelions, which, most people think of as a weed, but I thought it was kind of interesting, the metaphor you could make for people who are in their working career versus getting ready to retire and phase into that process Perry has talked about. We may have a lot more gray and white than we did before, but there's also more opportunity to go the places we want, and people make wishes on dandelions for a reason.
Yeah, that's a great saying, but you're kind of triggering me here. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, that's the one good thing about COVID. I don't have any of those in my yard anymore. They're the one victim of the lockdown. No weeds.
I think an important takeaway to this is, before it's too late. I have a client who's also a neighbor, and after he retired, they took several cruises, and shortly after that, his wife was diagnosed with a form of like muscular dystrophy. So she has a hard time even getting in and out of the car. So they can't even take much road trips together. And he said to me one day, he says, I'm so glad we did those things after I retired, because we wouldn't be able to do them today.
Mm.
Yeah, there's definitely multiple pieces to the retirement story. It's not one moment. There's phases. I know, Jim, you've talked about this before at length about there's different parts of that story.
It's not an event, it's a process. So
the early years of the go-go years, the next period of time are the slow go years, and the final period are the no-go years. So you want to definitely take advantage of if you have things on your list that require it, you want to take advantage of those go-go years, because they don't last forever.
Yeah. No time like the present in the near future.
We can show you what's possible and probable.
Yep, we certainly can. And anyways, we're wrapping up to the end here. I want to thank our panelists. This is a lot of really good information, just good perspective. I know all of you have had the chance to see a lot of people and how they approach this fun problem of figuring out what to do with one's time. And I think if there's any takeaways here, some big takeaways, if you're a client and you're watching this and you have, maybe this inspired some thoughts or some ideas that you have, please reach out to us. Let us know if you have some things that you want to plan for that we haven't talked about already. And then if you're not a client and you're listening to this, these are the fun things that we get to help people accomplish. And we love being able to do that. And so if you feel like you have questions and you want to see where you stand, reach out to us. Our contact information is right here. And we have much more content on our YouTube channel as well, where you can catch a lot of the other webinars that we've done. but feel free to reach out to us. Panelists, again, thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to doing another webinar soon. Until then, stay healthy, stay safe, everybody, and take care.
Thanks all.
Thank you.